An ILC podcast.
How well do you really know your grandparents, their stories, their life experiences?
We are here with students from the Independent Learning Center who engaged in design thinking to solve problems in our community. This is part of a series on combating social isolation.
During the pandemic, all of us have been isolated, and as young students, we wanted to connect with the elders in a meaningful way. We wanted to hear their stories.
We are here to talk with Gudrun and Rob.
So the first question is, where were you born and where did you grow up?
Okay, I can start. I'm Gudrun. So I was born in the north of Sweden. I came to this country in 1981 when I was 31. And I came to this area in 1999 in December. And I guess over to Rob.
I was born in Oakland, California, and my mom was from Fort Bragg in Northern California. So we spent a lot of time in the redwoods camping, and I loved that. But outside of the Bay Area, most of my time I was up here. I came here in 1968. And then I moved back to California to help my mom in 1989 and stayed there for 10 years. And I met Gudrun and convinced her to move back up here.
Great.
And we were lucky to find this home here on the river. That's it. What's next?
So, Gudrun, what was your career and why did you choose it?
Okay, well, there were four things that I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a pop singer. I wanted to be a hairdresser. I wanted to be an actress. And then, when I talked to guidance counselors, how fast can you type, dear? Basically, I was persuaded to choose something realistic. So I went through teachers college. So I taught English and French for high school kids and adults in Sweden. And here I took whatever jobs I could find. So I worked for the Army Air Force exchange service as a personnel clerk. And then I was married and worked on software development with my husband. We had a program that we sold. And I wrote documentation for that. And let's see, then I worked for Department of Rehabilitation as a counselor teacher. And now I work as a freelance translator, interpreter, and online voice instructor.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of different things. Wow.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Wow.
I moved up here in 1968 to take a job with the Fish and Wildlife Service, which was at the hatchery in Winthrop. And I liked the area so well that I quit them after a couple of years, which everybody said, oh, that's terrible. But anyway, and then like a lot of people in the valley, just did anything I could do to keep going. Worked for the Forest Service for a couple of years, worked for Okanagan County Electric. And then, because I like to cook, someone suggested, well, you should go to Sun Mountain. And they just opened and see about cooking. So I did that, and I got a job. And I was there probably a couple of years. And then I had a friend in town who owned a restaurant, and he wanted to expand it. So I came down there and ran that for 7 years maybe. And then at some point when that ended, I opened the Paddle Inn in Winthrop, and I did that for about maybe 3 years.
What is your favorite memory and why?
Oh, mine. It's easy, I guess. There's probably a lot if you thought about it, but I think that time camping in the redwoods is probably something that really sticks with me because it wasn't like in a state park. It was on a river outside of Mendocino. And my uncle worked for the lumber company, and if you worked there, you could get a lease to camp out there on their property. And it was like $1 a year or something. And you could build a cabin if you wanted, but when we first started, I was like 4 years old probably. Drive out about 10 miles over a bad dirt road and slept on army cots or on the ground. And had a little kitchen eventually with orange crate nailed up on trees. And you had freedom. There was nobody to say, don't put this here, don't camp there. It's time for lights out. It's time to get up. You just did whatever you wanted to. And it was on the river, so there was a nice swimming hole. So that tied with, hiking a little bit and stuff, I think and picking blackberries.
Aw. How about you, Gudrun?
Well, I have a couple of different things, but one was, I was working for the Department of Rehabilitation. It was lots of data entry about clients and so forth. But I had one thing helped to maintain my sanity. Please don't post that on Facebook in case my former supervisor should be watching. But so, as part of my job, I had to travel around the Bay Area to clients and help them with certain things. And I had a driver, and we stopped at a cafe in Half Moon Bay, and there was a couple singing, a man on the guitar and a woman that he was singing with. And so the next Monday when I had this client, I was to teach this client Braille, and he was very, very non-receptive. So I felt that after working with him, I needed a stiff drink. So they had very good cappuccino at that. And there was this singer alone. The woman wasn't with him. And so I turned to him and I said, nice going. And after that, we started to sing together every Monday from 11 to 1, which meant that for the rest of the week, I would sit at the desk and eat my red pepper strips and celery sticks and bread and salami or whatever I had for lunch at my desk, because I would not, I would be very dedicated for the rest of the week, just in case, And that was a wonderful memory, and that it was a recurring thing, so it went on for years. And another one was, she wasn't really my biological grandma, but she was my sort of step-grandma. And she loved to sing songs, tragic songs about famine and death and things. And I found them very fascinating. And both of her and her husband, my step-grandpa, they would read to me. And I loved that. And so that was my favorite stuff. That was, I hear all these stories and songs and stuff. I loved that.
Wow, that sounds really cool.
Yeah. I love the bit about singing with the man on the street.
Yeah.
And you were a singer before that anyway, right?
Yeah. I've studied singing and so forth. So, and I have, but that was a regular gig we had there for years. That was wonderful.
And they were really good together. And this guy, Ori.
Very good at different types of songs. And he was just great.
So, I don't know, I kind of just want to go off on a little something else. What kind of work were you doing at the rehabilitation department?
I was what's called a counselor teacher. Most of my colleagues had mainly one thing that they did, and that was to try to find work for clients. But I was supposed to help clients specifically who had lost their vision to adapt. And it was anything from making a cup of tea, sewing a button, vacuuming, and try to orient them to different devices that they can use, know how to take notes or keep track of things, and how to label things and all that stuff. So I did that. But some of them actually, they preferred to stay with the devil they knew, so they wanted me to do job placements too with a few of them. So I did a little bit of that.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, that must have been a really cool experience.
It was. It wasn't what I had planned, but I sort of decided that if I have the job, my clients aren't going to suffer for the fact that I wanted to be a pop singer or something.
Right.
I'm doing the best I can for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And Gudrun was good. and is good at not letting paperwork get in the way. She got things done that needed to be done, even if she had to skip a few lines, or
Yeah, well, I was called on the carpet a few times. Yeah.
I can ask a question. Rob, what world event or events had the biggest impact on you in your life and why?
Oh, I suppose the first photographs of the Earth from space, that was pretty dramatic.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember I had that photograph on my ceiling for a while above my bed. So, I don't know. I feel like I don't want to name something because I don't want to prioritize something over something else. I mean,
That makes sense.
What about you, Gudrun?
I think that I can't remember exactly when it was, but the invasion of Czechoslovakia was very because it was in Europe, and I lived in Sweden at the time, and I thought, what is that going to lead to? And the world, is the world going to get into a bloody war? And I also felt a lot of sympathy with the leaders who were trying to resist. And anyway, so yeah, that was important to me.
How has the world changed since you were born in terms of culture, economy, and politics?
A big difference
Yeah.
between when you were little to now.
I don't know that it's different now than then. I'm afraid it isn't, but just the fact that all these people that supposedly have knowledge can't seem to do anything about all the issues that are serious. Congress just goes on and on. And so, perhaps in a negligent way, I feel like I've kind of dropped out from all of that stuff, even though you're saturated with it every day if you turn the radio on.
How about you, Gudrun? How has the world changed since you were born?
Well, I find that people are more drawn into technology that was basically non-existent when I was growing up, and so the first years that I can remember, we might listen to a quiz program on the radio, and everybody was trying to answer the questions, or people were participating sort of, even if they were listening to the radio. And if there was dance music, my step-grandpa and I would dance. And, I sort of feel that now there is so much to choose from. There's so much quantity and a little bit less quality, I would say. I have to say, though, that this community here is actually one of the nicest community that you could be, because I feel that decency and common sense are still very much ruling here, the norm here. And that's something that it's not something to take for granted. There's lots of communities where there's very little of it. And I think that's a reason why I think I'm glad I moved here. Too much time is taken up by technology trying to resolve it, because you sort of feel if I don't resolve it, it's going to come back and bite me one day when I'm trying to get something done.
Yes.
So,
What is something you wish would happen to make the world a better place?
now's your time. Wish.
I'm thinking. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things on the list that people are aware of, but how to get the world all behind achieving some of those things.
For me, it's environment. I think it's very important to take care of our planet, because if we don't sustain the planet, it doesn't matter what else we do, because we need to have air to breathe and water to drink that's potable. And
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be.
so focus on climate, I
two
think.
issues: the climate and water. Food has always been an issue, but I mean, I think when water really becomes more of an issue,
That's
hopefully it'll drive people out of necessity to make some changes.
What important lessons have you learned in your life?
I can make perfect fried eggs. Let's see. I think something that I probably thought about, when you look at your life, which is probably a little easier to do when you're older, but I realized, I guess, through some reading and also my own thoughts that, my gosh, what have I done? Not, you call it a choice, but how did you make that choice? Did you make the choice because everything on one side had some negative things, like fear being one of them, for instance, or because it was, the biggest thing that was offered or available at the time? Or did you really make your own decision and try to go with that? And I thought, from my own life, which friends could look at and say, well, your life's been great and so forth. And I feel like it has too. And I feel like I've been real lucky. But I also realized that I made a lot of choices out of fear. Mm. I mean, as a kid and even now, I stuttered. And that can still stop me now from doing things. Mm-hmm. I mean, I might seem fluent enough here, but when it came time in high school to choose, you go to your job counselor or whatever, and he was missing a thumb, so he said, well, I wouldn't work in a sawmill. Well, and because I loved the outdoors and expressed all the joy in that, and because I stuttered and was afraid of speaking, I avoided school teaching, for instance, because it would involve speaking. And of course, when he heard I liked the outdoors, he said, well, you should be a forester, Mm-hmm. And it was just sort of that simple. Mm. I mean, that really wasn't my choice. Mm. I often joke that, well, he didn't say anything about clown college or some other thing, So, but I mean, that thought, it's a little hard to think about it because you realize that, you could be going on, thinking that you're in charge of yourself and doing what's the best for you. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you look, you find that, there's other reasons why you're making these decisions, or you take this road instead of that road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what about you, Gudrun?
Well, I think that I have learned conflict resolution a little bit better. My former husband was an expert witness for PG&E, and I had a conflict with the translation agency, and instead of writing an angry letter, he wrote a letter that was very factual, but just with a little bit of an ironic twist here and there, so that the agency person felt ashamed. He said, "I overreacted," he said to me. And I learned from that if you are upset with somebody, be very factual. If you have to, your first draft can be a scorcher. Swear and say all the angry things you want to say. Then turn it into English, proper, polite English. Say what happens. Don't say that you hurt you insulted me, all that stuff. Just say exactly what happens, and then if the person is reading that person will A, understand what he or she did wrong, maybe, B, be able to save face. Mm-hmm. That person can look good by apologizing rather than looking bad by giving in because you're screaming at them. Mm-hmm. So I found that this is an effective way of dealing with problems. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that you both sort of come to a good conclusion.
Yeah,
feel all right about it.
Yeah, because if the objective is to make the person feel bad, well, that's what that doesn't solve any problems. But if we can get the problem into perspective and get rid of it, that's much better.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Wow.
Make sure that as you grow up and into further stages in life, keep some younger people in your life, because we're running out of 35-year-olds when it comes to and we don't have any of those. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So be sure you keep connected with the next generation.
Try to have a good sense of humor, because as someone said, a sense of humor is a sense of proportion. So it kind of puts things
in a better perspective.
And, yeah.
Yeah, last question. How do you want to be remembered?
Oh, I'd like to be remembered. Gosh, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
We put the hard one last.
Yeah. Why don't you go first, Rob?
Well, I mean, again, the easy answers, I suppose, is because I was in the restaurant business for so long. I could say, to be remembered as having a great place that everybody enjoyed coming to, and that I was a good cook and so forth. But I mean, that in a way that seems sort of not superficial, but kind of a little bit. But and on the other extreme, which seems sort of like too sweetsy or whatever, that a person who was kind most of the time to people, and who has a good sense of humor, but just whatever that means to people, that I was a decent person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say the same. I guess I wouldn't mind if people remembered any of my performance as as a performer. That would be fun too.
Yeah.
As a candy maker.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well, all those things that you have talents for and explore, like,
Yeah.
You're happy you're a good artist or whatever, if you
Yeah.
are, or a good baker or a good mason or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like there's other things that maybe are a little deeper that, people really value you for.
Mm-hmm. But as long as they have something good to remember me by, that's I guess I should be happy.
Yeah.
You don't get to be present and hear all. Some people maybe life advice: have your funeral beforehand so you can hear all the good things people are saying about you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so
Yeah,
much.
thank you so
Sure.
much. That
Yeah.
was amazing.
Yeah,
I
such
love this
amazing
so much. Oh my
stories.
gosh.
Oh, good.
You've been listening to an ILC podcast with Isla,
Lucy?
Georgie,
Kim.
Willow, Caitlin,
And Bella.
Thanks for joining us.